we come presenting the founder and the president of the most significant Southern Christian Leadership Conference, having its inspiration come out of the Montgomery Association, which was spurred into being by the heroic action of a great African Methodist woman, Rosa Parks of Montgomery. We come presenting a great American. And as we present him, we list the fact that it's generally known that he is a PhD. He has a PhD degree from Boston University in the field of systematic theology, that he has joined many of us who sit here tonight in witnessing by going to jail, and certainly by sending his famous letter from the Birmingham jail. We present a man with a dream similar to that of the ancient prophets given in a new setting, which stated that every mountain shall be level and every valley shall be exalted. We come presenting a great civil rights leader. But what's perhaps more important is that he is identified with the average man, the man of the mill, the man of the valley, the man of the hill, the man at the throttle, the man at the plow, the man with the fruit of his toil on his brow. We present to you at this time a great leader, Martin Luther King. Let us receive him.
To the distinguished bishops of this great church, and to all of the general officers and delegates, and to this General Conference of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, ladies and gentlemen. After listening to the glowing words of my good friend Fred James, I feel something like the old maid who had never been married. She went to work one day, and the lady for whom she worked said, "Ann, I hear you are getting married." She looked up and said, "No, I'm not getting married, but thank God for the rumor." Now, all of these marvelous things that he has said about me can't be true, but thank God for the rumor. I really don't have adequate words to express the deep joy that comes to my heart tonight in having the privilege to come here to be a part of this great and significant meeting. I guess there are many things that one could say tonight as we think about this difficult problem of racial injustice which pervades our nation. But I would like to have you think with me for the moments left from the subject remaining awake through a great revolution. Many of you, I'm sure, have read that very interesting an arresting story by Washington Irving entitled Rip Van Winkle. The thing that we usually remember about this story is that Rip Van Winkle slept 20 years. But that is another point in that story that is almost always completely overlooked. It was a sign on the inn in the little town on the Hudson, from which Rip went up into the mountain for his long sleep. When he went up, the sign had a picture of King George III of England. When he came down 20 years later, the sign had a picture of George Washington, the first president of the United States.
That's right.
And when Rip Van Winkle looked up at the picture of George Washington, he was amazed. He knew not who he was. This reveals to us that the most striking thing about the story of Rip Van Winkle is not merely that he slept 20 years, but that he slept through a revolution. While he was peacefully snoring up on the mountain, a great revolution was taking place that would change the face of the earth. And Rip knew nothing about it. He was asleep. One of the great liabilities of history is the fact that all too many people find themselves sleeping through great periods of social change, and they fail to achieve the mental attitudes that the new conditions and new situations demand. And in a real sense, that is nothing more tragic than to sleep through a revolution. Certainly a great revolution is going on in our world today. It is sweeping away an old order, bringing into being a new order. We see it in Asia and in Africa as we listen from afar to the deep rumblings of discontent. I remember when we attended the independent celebration of the new nation of Ghana back in 1957. That night when the new nation was to come into being, we stood there in the midst of some 200,000 people. We noticed a handsome black man as he came out to the platform. He stood before his people, and as he stood there, Kwame Nkrumah said, "We are now a free and independent nation." And at that point I looked over and I saw an old flag coming down. It was the Union Jack flag. And I saw a new flag going up, the flag of the new nation of Ghana. And I looked around and said to my wife and Congressman Adam Powell and Dr. Ab Bunch, who was standing nearby, this is not merely a symbol of a meaningless drama taking place on the stage of history. That old flag coming down is the symbol of an old order passing away. And that new flag, going up is a symbol of a new age coming into being. And since that dark night in March of 1957, some 27 new independent countries have come into being in Africa. This is a great revolution that is taking place in the world. It's taking place in the United States. We need not look very far to see that, because we are all participants in this magnificent drama that is taking place. It is sweeping away the old order of segregation and paternalism, and bringing in the new order of justice and integration. And I am convinced as I stand before you tonight that the system of segregation is on its deathbed, and the only thing uncertain about it is how costly the segregationists will make the funeral. So a great revolution is taking place in our nation and in the world. But we are challenged as concerned citizens, we are challenged as Christians to remain awake through this great revolution. And I would like to suggest some of the things that we must do in order to remain awake through this great social revolution. First, we must continue to affirm the immorality of racial segregation. Anyone who feels that racial segregation is right is sleeping through a revolution. Somehow we must come to see that integration is more than something that's taken place in a sort of sociological changing sense. Great theologians, when they've talked about God, have usually gotten around to the point of saying that even God works toward integration. When Henry Nelson Wyman defined God, he said he's a process of integration. When Alfred North Whitehead defined God, he said he's a principle of concretion. When Paul Tillich defined God, he said he's being itself. When Jan Smuts defined God, he said he's a process of holism. And whenever we think of God, we think of a being working to bring the disconnected aspects of reality into a harmonious whole. One great theologian has said that sin is separation. And what is segregation but the existential expression of man's tragic separation, his awful estrangement, his terrible sinfulness? And so segregation is not only politically unsound, segregation is not only sociologically untenable, segregation is morally wrong and sinful. Segregation is wrong, to use the words of the great Jewish philosopher Martin Buber, because it substitutes an I-it relationship for the I-thou relationship. Segregation is wrong because it is nothing but a new form of slavery covered up with certain niceties of complexity. Segregation is wrong because it assumes that God made a mistake and infiltrated the very being of certain people with a tragic yoke of inferiority. Segregation is wrong because it is a system of adultery perpetuated by an illicit relationship between injustice and immorality. So all over this land, all over this nation, we must make it clear that we will no longer sell our birthright of freedom for a mess of segregated parties. We must make it clear. We must make it clear that we are through with segregation now, henceforth, and forevermore. Now, second thing that I would like to say is this. we must make full and creative use of the freedom we already possess. This means even though we have not yet reached the promised land of freedom, we must work hard to achieve excellence in our various fields of endeavor. Now we have a problem here, a real dilemma. And I don't think many of our white brothers realize the great dilemma that we face. As I hear them talking from time to time, it's a real dilemma. What is that dilemma? We were the victims through our foreparents of slavery for 244 years. And then another 100 years of segregation. And now the forces of history demand that we be as productive, that we be as resourceful as the individuals who have never known such oppression and discrimination. This is our dilemma. What is our dilemma? It is simply this. He who gets behind in a race must forever remain behind or run faster than the man in front. That's our dilemma. And so I'm not unmindful of this dilemma, but it must serve as a challenge. We must go all out now to work hard. If we are young and in school, we must burn the midnight oil. We must go all out to develop our inner powers and our talent. Doors are opening now. Doors of opportunity are opening now that were not open to our mothers and fathers. And the great challenge facing us is to be ready to enter these doors as they open. Ralph Waldo Emerson said in a lecture back in 1871 that if a man can write a better book, or preach a better sermon, or make a better mousetrap than his neighbor, even if he builds his house in the woods, the world will make a beaten path to his door. This will become increasingly true. And so we must set out to do a good job, and to do that job so well that nobody could do it any better. We must not set out merely to do a good Negro job. Anybody that sets out to do that is sleeping through a revolution. As I've said so often, if one sets out merely to be a good Negro doctor, a good Negro lawyer, a good Negro school teacher, a good Negro preacher, a good Negro skilled laborer, a good Negro barber, a beautician, you've already flunked your matriculation exam for entrance into the University of Integration. We must set out to do a good job and do that job so well that the living, the dead, or the unborn couldn't do it any better. So if it falls your lot to be a street sweeper, go on out and sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry. Sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who swept his job well. Yes, if you can't be a pine on the top of the hill, be a scrub in the valley. Go ahead. But be the best little scrub on the side of the reel. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a highway, just be a trail. If you can't be the sun, be a star. It isn't by size that you win or you fail. Be the best of whatever you are. If we will do this, we will remain awake through a great revolution. Next, if we are to remain awake through this great revolution, we must see the necessity for developing an action program to get rid of the last vestiges of segregation and discrimination. Now, if anybody here this evening feels that this problem will work itself out and that we should just sit around and wait on time to solve it, I hate to tell you, but you're sleeping through a revolution.
Yes, sir! Go ahead.
Some people sincerely believe that. I must say to you tonight, my friend, that history is the long and sometimes tragic story of the fact that privileged groups never give up their privileges voluntarily and without strong resistance.
Yes, sir.
History is the long and tragic story of the fact that groups rarely do this. Sometimes individuals see the moral light and decide to change and pull their brother along with them. But Reinhold Niebuhr has reminded us in his book, Moral Man and Immoral Society, that groups are a little more immoral and naughty than individuals. We've got to come to see that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. So we must see the need for a strong action program. We must continue to engage in protest activities. We must continue to seek to gain the ballot in large numbers, for I'm still convinced that one of the most significant steps that the Negro can take at this hour is that short walk to the voting booth. We must continue to pool our economic resources. And more we must come to the point that we will say to industry, if you are going to respect my dollar, you must respect my person. And if you are not willing to provide jobs for Negroes, then we will just withdraw our economic support, and through selective buying programs, we will bring them in line. We must continue to work through the courts. We must continue to work through nonviolent direct action. Let nobody fool you. I hear the talk about demonstrations, and there are those who are trying to say we should stop demonstrating. Well, I must remind you tonight that that is a debate taking place in Congress concerning a vital civil rights bill. And that bill just didn't fall out of thin air. It came as a result of demonstrations. I would remind you that segregation has about ended in public transportation in all but a few communities, in some Mississippi places in Alabama, but on the whole in public transportation we have almost total integration. But I would remind you that this came as a result of demonstration. Some 350 southern cities since 1960 have integrated their lunch counters and hotels and restaurants. But I must remind you tonight that that came through demonstration. And so it is so often to bring these issues to the surface and bring them out into the open where everybody can see them through demonstrations. And so all of these methods are necessary As we work on in the days ahead, we must develop an action program. Now let me say just a word about the Civil Rights Bill in the Senate. We must somehow get it over that this bill must pass, and they've been debating on it a little too long now. It's no longer a legitimate debate. I heard one of the senators saying the other day, you see, he said, we've got to analyze it and we've got to study it a little more. And we are tired of studies now. You know, you can get bogged down in the paralysis of analysis. And it's time for this bill to pass. Now, it came through the House largely unscarred through a magnificent demonstration of bipartisan cooperation. Now that bill is in the Senate, and the rules in the Senate are different. That is Rule 22, which for years has served as the legislative incinerator that has burned to ashes every significant move towards civil rights legislation. And it makes it possible for men to talk endlessly and talk until the bill is weakened. And this is what the Southern senators are seeking to do. They know as well as I know that there will be a civil rights bill in this session of Congress, but they are trying to so weaken that bill with crippling amendments that it will have no meaning, and they will seek to weaken it at 3 points. The section dealing with ending segregation in public accommodation. The section dealing with cutting off federal funds in federally assisted projects which practice discrimination, and the section dealing with equal employment opportunities. But I say to you tonight that I'm convinced that these three sections are so important to that bill that I would rather see no civil rights bill at all than a bill without these three sections. Time for that filibuster to end. It's time for these men who represent our nation and the states all over our nation to vote. Just a few days ago, we heard a lot of talk about a stall-in. And many of us felt that that stall-in shouldn't have taken place. We felt that it would have been a tactical error for it to take place. And we made that publicly clear. And so it was fortunate that the stall-in didn't take place at the World's Fair in New York. But what I was concerned about, and what started bothering me a great deal, was the fact that so many editorial writers and public officials were condemning the stall-in and not condemning the conditions that made it cause the people to feel that they had to engage in such drastic civil disobedience. They overlooked the fact that at this present time there is a stall-in taking place in the United States Senate. And if these persons are as vigorous in condemning the stall-in in the Senate as they were in condemning the stall-in at the World's Fair, we will have a civil rights bill in the next few days. It was on sweltering afternoon last June that a young, intelligent, courageous, dedicated president stood before the nation. He said in eloquent terms, the issue which we face in civil rights is not merely a political issue. It is at bottom a moral issue. He went on to say it is as old as the Scriptures and as modern as the Constitution. It is a question of whether we will treat our Negro brothers as we ourselves would like to be treated. Since that day in June, our nation has known a dark day and a dreary night. That same young man was cut down by an assassin's bullet on Elm Street in Dallas, Texas. I think the greatest tribute that America can pay the late John Fitzgerald Kennedy is to see that that civil rights bill is passed without being watered down at any point. issuing a threat now, but stating an actual fact. If this bill does not pass, the already ugly sword of racial injustice on the body politic may suddenly turn malignant, and our nation will be inflicted with an incurable cancer that will totally destroy our political and moral health. It is necessary for the health of the nation for this bill to pass, and so an action program is necessary to get this bill through. But may I give what I always consider a warning signal as we struggle in the days ahead, as we struggle to make justice a reality. May we continue to delve deeper into the philosophy and method of nonviolence. I know it's difficult, and I know that there are dark days still ahead. But in spite of the difficulties of the hour, I'm still convinced that nonviolence is the most potent weapon available to oppressed people in their struggle for freedom and human dignity. If the Negro succumbs to the temptation of using violence in his struggle, unborn generations will be the recipients of a long and desolate night of bitterness. And our chief legacy to the future will be an endless reign of meaningless chaos. And may I also say that we must not make this a hate campaign. We must have and continue our legitimate discontent. We must have a righteous indignation, but never allow it to go down to the valley of bitterness and hatred. For hate is as injurious to the subject of hate as it is to the object of hate. And psychiatrists are telling us now that many of the strange things that happen in the subconscious, many of the inner conflicts are rooted in hate. And they are now saying, love or perish. Well, Jesus said it a long time ago, and that is a voice still crying through the vista of time, saying, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Pray for them that despitefully use you. That is still a voice saying, he who lives by the sword will perish by the sword. And history is cluttered with the wreckage of nations. History is replete with the bleached bones of communities that failed to follow this command. And so I'm still convinced that nonviolence is the way. It disarms the opponent. It exposes his moral defenses. It weakens his morale, and at the same time it works on his conscience. And he just doesn't know how to handle it. If he doesn't beat you, wonderful. But even if he beats you, you develop the quiet courage of accepting blows without retaliating. If he doesn't put you in jail, wonderful. Nobody with any sense loves to go to jail. But if he puts you in jail, you go in that jail and transform it from a dungeon of shame to a haven of freedom and human dignity. Even if he tries to kill you, you develop the inner conviction that there are some things so dear, some things so precious, some things so eternally true that they're worth dying for. And if a man has not discovered something that he will die for, he isn't fit to live. So there's power in this method. I've seen it so often along with my great friend and associate, this great leader, Fred Shuttlesworth, who's here on the platform tonight. We struggled together in Birmingham, and I watched Bull Connor. He was always happy when some of the spectators on the sideline would begin to throw rocks and throw bottles. He was very happy when he saw Negroes doing that. Now, he was happy because he's an expert in violence and in dealing with violence. But oh, when Brother Bull Connor had to look up and see hundreds and thousands of young men and women, old men and women, walking the streets of Birmingham, moving on up to the face of Bull Connor, singing, "Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around." And then when he ordered his men to use all of their rough methods to throw them in the paddy wagons, and he had to notice them going in the paddy wagons with humble smiles on their faces, singing, "Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom." And then as he saw the paddy wagon moving away, he could still hear voices ringing out, singing, "Over my head I see freedom in the air." Bull Connor couldn't understand this. He didn't know how to handle this. Because of this, that community, which said that it would never integrate its lunch counters in many of its facilities, has to face integration at its lunch counters today and in many other facilities. There's power in this method. And so if we go this way, we can truly be God's children, and we can help America save her soul. Maybe God has called us here for this hour, not merely to free ourselves, but to free all of our white brothers and save the soul of this nation. We can't save it through hate. We can't save it through violence. And if we will take this power of nonviolence, we will go into the new age which is emerging with the right attitude. We will not ever allow this struggle to become so polarized that it becomes a struggle between black men and white men. We must see that the tension in this nation is between injustice and justice, between the forces of light and the forces of darkness. And that is a victory. And also we will go into the new age which is emerging, not seeking to rise from a position of disadvantage to one of advantage, thereby subverting justice. We will not substitute one tyranny for another, but we will know that a doctrine of black supremacy is as dangerous as a doctrine of white supremacy. We will know that God is not interested merely in the freedom of black men and brown men and yellow men, but God is interested in the freedom of the whole human race and the creation of a society where all men will live together as brothers and every man will respect the dignity and worth of human personality. And so if we will do this, we will remain awake through a great revolution. May I urge each of you assembled here to go back to your communities after this great conference is over, determined to be involved participants in this great struggle, not detached spectators. We need everybody. We need all of you. Yes. And I would urge every clergyman to take it seriously. Many of the people who sit under the sound of your voices Sunday after Sunday cannot speak for themselves. God has blessed you with the ability to speak, with the ability to articulate their longings. Yes, sir. He's blessed you with many other things that many of your followers don't have. And God is depending on the preachers of the gospel to lead us out of this dark Egypt of slavery and segregation. And if we will do this, we will bring into being that better day. And I know some of us wonder how long it will take. We began to crowd within. How long will prejudice blind the visions of men, darken their understanding, and drive bright-eyed wisdom from her sacred throne? Somebody here tonight is asking a question. When will wounded justice, lying prostrate on the streets of our cities, be lifted from this dust of shame to reign supreme among the children of men? Somebody's asking tonight, when will the radiant star of hope be plunged against the nocturnal bosom of this lonely night, plucked from weary souls the chains of death and the manacles of fear? How long will justice be crucified and truth bear it? How long will we have to struggle in this righteous cause? How long will we have to seek to be first-class citizens in this nation? I say to you, not long. History is the long story of the fact that somehow righteousness is stronger than evil. History is the long story of the fact that goodness defeated is stronger than evil triumphant. History is the story of the fact that there is something in this universe that Greek mythology called the goddess of Nemesis. And we've seen it, haven't we? Our faith tells us this. It tells us that evil may so shape events that Caesar will occupy the palace and Christ a cross. But one day, that same Christ will rise up and split history into AD and BC so that even the life of Caesar must be dated by his name. It tells us something. It tells us that Good Friday may occupy the throne for a day, but ultimately it must give way to the triumphant beat of the drums of Easter. And so tonight I have faith in the future. We are going to win our victory for freedom. We are going to win because in this struggle we have cosmic companionship. And I'm going to still sing, we shall overcome. In the midst of howling, vicious, violent police dogs, I'm going to still sing, we shall overcome. In the midst of the chilly winds of adversity, standing amid the surging murmur of life's restless sea, I'm going to still sing, we shall overcome. In the midst of the bombing of our churches, and the burning of our houses, and the jailing of our children, I'm going to still sing, we shall overcome. In the midst of hooded perpetrators of violence coming into our communities, dragging us out on some wayside road, beating us and leaving us half dead, I'm going to still sing, we shall overcome. And I'll tell you why I'm going to sing it and why I believe it. Because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. I'm going to sing it and I believe it because Carlyle is right. No lie can live forever. I believe it because William Cullen Bryant is right. Truth crushed earth will rise again. I'm going to sing it because James Russell Lowell is right. Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne, yet that scaffold sways the future. And behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. I'm going to sing it because the Bible is right. You shall reap what you sow. And with this faith, centuries ago, the prophet Jeremiah raised the question. He looked out and noticed the inequalities of life. He noticed the good people so often suffering. And he noticed the wicked prospering. He cried out, is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? This was a significant and serious question. Centuries later, our slave foreparents came along and they too saw the injustices of life. They had nothing to look forward to morning after morning but the sizzling heat, the rawhide whip of the overseer, long rows of cotton. But they did an amazing thing. They took their pessimistic circumstances and used them as the raw material out of which they molded a creative pessimism. They looked back across the centuries and took Jeremiah's question mark and straightened it into an exclamation point, and they decided to sing, there is a balm in Gilead, heal the wounded soul. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. And I know sometimes, I see so many of you that I know from Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana and Georgia and other states. And I know so often as we struggle, we feel discouraged. So often we are frustrated in the midst of this and wonder how the whole thing will come out. But somehow we gain a new faith we began to cry, sometimes I feel discouraged and feel my works in vain. But then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wound whole.
Rousing ovation here in Cincinnati Gardens for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They're still on their feet after a speech that lasted just about exactly 1 hour. Listen to this applause.